Hey everyone, welcome to Robust American Love. My name is Karen Carboner and I'm president of the Walt Whitman Initiative. We are a 501c3 nonprofit with the mission of celebrating New York City's literary legacy. We're an organizing center for cultural activism and poetry related events, such as the one you're enjoying today. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram and tune into our YouTube channel to explore more presentations in this series. And if you like what we're doing, there are many ways to support us. Please visit Support Us at our website to find a PayPal link and an address. We're fueled by our love of poetry, but of course we need the public to sustain our programs, events, and initiatives, and we appreciate you. In fact, I wanted to announce an event on August 16th here in Brooklyn, New York, because thanks to you all, the Walt Whitman Initiative was able to raise enough money for a dedicated bench for our friend and fellow member, Greg Trupiano, who we miss very much. Greg passed away last year and was a incredibly important person in the cultural activist community in Brooklyn and of course among Whitmanites. And we are very, very happy to give him a permanent place in Fort Greene Park. So thanks to you all, and I'm sending a big thank you to everyone who contributed to that bench and inviting you all to top of the Fort Greene Park, which has a ranger station up there, 6 p.m. on August 16th. We will have music. Nicole Mitchell, a longtime associate of Greg's, who I'm sure a lot of you know, she will be singing. Greg's partner, Lon, will be giving a talk. Several of us will be giving talks, and there will be food. So please do come. And, you know, this series also is something that's sustained by your support. And you might notice that it is a speaker series, not a lecture series. This is a public-facing program, very informal, and focused on Whitman's life, work, and legacy, although we've branched out quite a bit with that theme. We have not just academics, but we have poets and graduate students, artists, printers, neighborhood activists, and incredible people like Jordan and Julia, who you're just about to meet, who bring people together in communities that are supportive, that are arts activist, and absolutely so much fun and incredible to get to know. So this series helps bring those people to light. And today, especially, I'm really proud to talk to both of them about the history of the Canadian Whitmanites. So this program probably functions as a sort of an oral history of the Canadian Whitmanites that does not exist as of yet. So please sit back and enjoy, and remember to check our YouTube channel later for all sorts of other events, including our next event, Tuesday, September 14th at 6 p.m. We are speaking with Amanda Deutsch, who's another incredible cultural center person in New York City. The program is called A Coney Island of the Mind, Poetry and Parachutes with Amanda Deutsch. And maybe some of you know her from her founding of Parachute Literary Arts, which is an incredible nonprofit down in Coney Island. They bring poetry to all sorts of different populations. And Amanda has just recently come out with an incredible new chapbook, which we will be celebrating, called My New York City. But she herself is worth celebrating. She's a born and raised New Yorker. She's published poetry in the New York Times, 92nd Street Y. She's won several prizes. So she's a real treat also to get to know. So please do remember September 14th for our next show. But tonight, again, sit back and relax. We're taking you to Canada. Tenon'd and mortis'd in granite. Walt Whitman in Canada is the name of our program. And I don't know if y'all can see my t-shirt, but it's actually a t-shirt from the Canadian Whitmanites. My foothold is tenon'd and mortis'd in granite. I laugh at what you call dissolution, and I know the amplitude of time. Some of you may know that that is carved on a huge rock in Ontario called Mazinaw. Is it called Mazinaw? I'm going to have the experts on in a second. The Canadian Whitmanites have been around for a very long time, and the elder set actually are responsible for that carving. Today, I am bringing you the spokespeople of the modern Canadian Whitmanites. And I'd like to welcome to the show Julia Garro, the founder and the organizer of the Canadian Song of Myself Marathon, and Jordan Bond Gore, who has been incredible in helping Julia sustain this programming. Hello, guys. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you
Hello.
for having us.
Happy to be
So,
here.
are you both tuning in from Canada? Could you tell us a little bit about where you are right now?
Well, I am tuning in to you from my little farmhouse in Roslyn, Ontario, which is just about a half hour north of Belleville. Probably not many people watching will necessarily know where that is. It's between Toronto and Montreal.
So you live pretty close, as I recall, because I've been lucky enough to go to the farm and to the reading in 2019. You live pretty close, and I guess was the park always kind of a presence for you even before you started getting into this whole Canadian Whitmanites thing, or?
Oh, absolutely. But I actually moved here really recently. I used to be in Toronto. I only moved out here about coming up on 6 years ago now. But yes, Bon Echo Provincial Park is just about an hour northeast of where I am now. And yeah, definitely. I feel like my connection with Bon Echo started before Canadian Whitmanites, but is very tied up to my experience at Whitman. So we're going to talk about that.
And we're going to see it because you guys have prepared an amazing slideshow and with
Jordan has, because he's awesome.
And that is really Jordan's field of expertise. Jordan, we are so happy to have you here. And where are you located right now?
Well, sadly, I'm not on the farm. I was supposed to be on the farm this week, but an unhappy misfortune meant I had to come back to Toronto, which is where I live. So Toronto is the major urban center that I think most folks in the United States are familiar with. Not as lovely and bucolic as the farm. There are no alpacas here with me.
Toronto is great. Don't put down Toronto.
Oh, no, we're not that great. It's a pastime in Toronto to put Toronto down by Torontonians, but it is a pretty great city. Don't get me wrong. But it's not a patch on the farm. So I've been privileged to spend a lot of time up there with Julie and Holly and the animals, and it's so beautiful. So, and I'm excited to share with our stories with you. So yeah, so thanks for having us.
Oh yeah, and as I said, like you guys are the keepers of the gate of the story of the Canadian Whitmanites. So I'm really happy to speak to both of you. And Jordan, you are you born and raised in Toronto? Are you Canadian?
I am a Canadian. I was born and raised in Kingston, Ontario, which is just a little bit south of here. It's closer to the New York State border than Toronto is. So a smaller town. And
actually know someone who teaches there.
Beautiful
there's
city.
A university there, a really great place. And how about Bon Echo? Was that a presence for you also before you got involved with the Canadian Whitmanites?
No, actually, it wasn't. I've been in a lot of other Canadian parks, but Bon Echo I was introduced to by Julia, and it really is like my first summer there reading for the Whitman Marathon reading was my first summer ever experiencing Bon Echo in Mazinaw Lake, which is gorgeous. And yeah, so it was wonderful to be exposed to a brand new park because I'm a bit of an outdoors buff. So
it is the type of scenery that New Yorkers dream about.
It's
so pastoral, so absolutely magnificent with the rock and the lake, and the event itself so full of heart and good spirit. Julia, I know you founded this whole experience. Can you tell us, can you just introduce yourself a little bit? Like I'm always curious about what brings people to Whitman. So do you have a particular story that, like, why Walt?
I do. I found Walt as a teenager, and I've been trying to figure out in advance of this talk, like the chronology for me, because I'm sure a lot of people like me, Dead Poet Society was their first like intro to Walt of like, who is this guy? But I definitely was not old enough to see it in the theater. So I would have had to have seen it on television afterwards. So I'm not sure whether seeing that movie came first or if my next Walt experience came first, which was that when I was in high school, I went to a performing arts high school. Shout out to the musical theater babies. And I was lucky enough to get hired to do a summer gig working with a bunch of other kids there was 6 of us from Toronto and 6 from like a number of other regions, excuse me, around the province, putting together these plays that were like anti-drug plays that we were then going to go into high schools and like perform. And they sent us all to develop these plays up to a campsite on Lake Catchacoma. And there I met the wonderful Bill Vincent, who was our voice instructor at the time. And he, as part of our diction exercises, had us practice and perform Oneself I Sing. And so that was my first, like, oh, yes, this is really capturing me. And I kind of got sucked in. And I know part of that was because Bill was so enthusiastic and so passionate about everything, but definitely he had that sparkle in his eye about Whitman that when I first met Greg Trupiano, I had that same like, yes, I know this sparkle. So yeah, so Bill/Dead Poet Society turned me on to Whitman. And then at the time in Ontario, everybody who was in their final year and planning to advance to university had to do an independent project. And I chose to do mine on Whitman. And funnily enough, as I was looking for things to prepare for this, I realized that I have like my 1-page, like handwritten notes from that. Yeah. Sorry, I'm like, did Jordan just start showing things? I'm not sure if you can see me or not. But anyway, I'm holding up the thing.
We see you on the side of the screen, and Jordan, I don't see any image.
I didn't. It's loading remarkably slow. That was supposed to be a smooth transition to Julia's photo, and then I just got a blank exit full screen. I'm so sorry about that, Julia. I didn't mean to throw you off your game.
I was just holding up the thing. That's all.
Anyway, don't worry.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then it was everything from there. I mean, I kind of just bit by bit transformed into a rabid Whitman fangirl, and here we are today.
So what was it though? Like, the way that I'm understanding it is you got introduced to him through the voice, right? And that kind of makes sense to me because in our Song of Myself marathon, you have been such a beloved reciter, always with a political, like a meaningful framework to your presentation, but also your voice, particularly strong. So really interesting to hear you say that there was something kind of vocal, an appeal of the sound of the poetry.
Absolutely.
But why found the Canadian Whitmanites? I mean, what does Whitman mean to the Canadian Whitmanites?
Jordan and I have been talking about this a lot over the last couple of days. And the thing we came down to, I don't want to speak for him, he'll get to him, but we're both very much activists at heart. And for me, my connection to Whitman's work is like a window into a better world that we can all work towards. And I feel like Whitman bypasses something in the brain where you can have intellectual conversations about what you want that better world to look like and how you think we should get there. But there's something about the poetry that really paints the picture and draws you in, and you can almost feel what that world would be like in your body. I think that's part of the magic.
That's such a brilliant way of describing it, because of course I'm in a similar position to you, and I guess especially as of late, because of the accusations of racism that Whitman is facing, I think a lot of us dealing with organizations named after him have to come to terms with certain things, right? To really look at him. And I just finished, it's very complicated. I just finished teaching the 21st iteration of Walt Whitman in New York. It's a class I've been teaching at Columbia for a long time. And of course we had to talk about race and Whitman in that class too. But I think what really emerged for us is that the poetry kind of remains intact, right? The poetry has this incredible message. It's an ideal that even Whitman, I don't think, could achieve. So there is something about hearing that poetry that kind of grounds us too. I would second that. I really like how you described it as a window That's a very cool way of thinking about it too, because it opens up to other things, right? And beyond
Mhm.
Whitman himself.
Absolutely.
Jordan, you want to chime in on this? Like, because I know you came to Whitman maybe a little bit in a more delayed fashion. Can you bring us to your path?
Oh, I'm a late bloomer when it comes to Whitman, and I really do owe a debt of thanks to Julia for exposing me to Whitman's work. I'd first heard of Walt Whitman when I was 14 years old. I had a subscription to National Geographic magazine. If anybody remembers National Geographic magazine, hopefully they do. It's still around. And they had done a special on Walt Whitman, and I remember reading it. And I remember when I was 14, the thing that stuck out to me was Walt Whitman was they made mention of the fact that he had same-sex relationships. And as a young queer growing up in a small town, you just latch on to whatever you can. I was like, oh, Walt Whitman, he's the gay poet and with a beard. That was what I remembered. And, when Julia first asked me to do the recitation in 2017, I had never read Song of Myself. I'd never spent a moment with his poetry. I'd heard him vaguely muttered about in university courses, but I'd never taken a course on Whitman. So my first exposure was actually reading his work out loud. And there was a bit of a scandal I caused on the Canadian Whitmanites Facebook page because I said something pertaining to his lusty sort of, male on male eroticism or something like that. And I was excited to read it because I thought I was going to read a bit of dirty poetry. And I hate to say, it's a little bit cheesy and not perhaps the most highbrow way to come about it, but I came about it all the same. And reading section 25 that year, which I know I completely hammed up the line about, oh, unspeakable passionate love, like it was like the most tawdry Playboy letter ever. But there was something about reading the poetry and also about hearing it, like Julia says, hearing it and reading it that moved me incredibly. And each year I haven't done much consistently in my life, but every summer I've come back to that reading. And with Whitman, what I've experienced is that everything that I bring to that reading of the poem, it changes my interpretation of it each year. I bring something to the poem and then Whitman gives me something back that I needed to hear. I'm glad I went to the University of Iowa's Whitman they've got a page where they break down what each section means. And so I
Right.
made sure that all of my thoughts were academically sound. So I feel no shame in sharing them now with people. But what I really love about Whitman, and I really loved about the last 2 years, I've read section 46. I read it at the marathon in Brooklyn, the virtual one, and then the year prior at the amphitheater in Bon Echo. And I just remember reading the lines about, I dare thee to be a bold swimmer. And I just, like, nothing has ever moved me in my life like that because of who I was when I encountered those words. And I think I encounter something very different each time I come back to any part of that particular poem. And like Julia says, I mean, it speaks to an activist, and Julia and I have a very shared long history of activism together, dating back to 1999, actually. But, he does speak of a better world, but he also speaks of humanity. And one of the things I loved about reading section 46 was, for the first time, I felt brought back to a shared sense of belonging and humanity. I've struggled with many things in my life, and sometimes when you're on the outside or on the margins, you don't feel like you're quite part of the human race. And here's this voice from the past, this old queer voice from the past, who is speaking to me today and telling me that I am part of everything and everything is part of me and I belong. And it's just beautiful. And it was something I never experienced before. So I'm by no means an academic scholar, but I'm a very passionate lover of this particular work. And I'm very grateful to Julia because her consistently putting on that event and her enthusiasm, because I only showed up that first year because Julia was my friend, right? But I didn't come back every year because Julia was just my friend. I came back every year because I loved what it was, and seeing that sort of small community gather up and seeing kids read and like older people read and like people from all these different walks of life. And I think one year, Julia, my partner, painted portraits during the reading. And
Oh, really? Wow.
yeah, it was really lovely to see. And it's just a very unique, quirky little community of people who've come together around this particular work. So that's what brought me to it and what keeps me coming back. So
You are waxing eloquent, Jordan, and I don't think you have to apologize or go to the University of Iowa website, although it's great to know about it, right? It's nice and fulsome, and I think the poet Chris Martin comment on every one of the 52 sections.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so many people like you and like Julia come to Whitman not out of a classroom, right? But out of just maybe a happenstance, like hearing the words at the right time in one's life and just hearing a message that you want to hear and replay. It happened to me too. And I was amazed that I had not heard of him before because I mean, I grew up in New York, but I think Whitman has always been somewhat marginalized because of his sexuality. You know, he was an outsider poet, also not educated. But anyway, very, very charming stories about like how you all kind of came together. And I know your signature event is the marathon, right? Can you guys tell us a little bit about that? And I know you have some cool photos and video to share as well.
Do you want to start up your slideshow?
Well, yeah, we'll start with the slideshow and we'll take you through it and we'll get there. So let me share the screen. Hopefully this works the second time around. I'm just going to take a moment because I lost my place when I did it the wrong way. Okay,
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Technology is technology, right?
Exactly.
It never works the first time around. Okay. Okay, we're just about ready to share the screen.
This silence is kind of like the silence of the Song of Myself marathon, right? I bet you guys are dying to bring it back to life after a long hiatus now.
Okay, so I guess, Julie, do you want me to speak to any of the slides or do you want to speak to them? It's up to you. I mean, we know what the first one's coming up is.
Yeah, I
Let's
think
move
we
through.
said some of the things we wanted to say, but
Yeah.
we can always say more.
Reading of Walt Whitman's Song of Myself.
Song of Myself, Sunday, Sunday, Sunday.
Canadians
Are we
are
excited?
irreverent.
Yahoo!
Woo!
Hello.
Walt Whitman,
Yeah, so, okay. We can speak to this one though briefly, Julie, if you want, because you guys talked about it earlier in the.
Yes, we did talk about it, but here you get to see it. So we'll talk a little more about these folks in the black and white photo in a second, but this is like the second generation Whitmanites under the Old Walt inscription on Mazinaw Rock. And then the other side, you can see kind of more like what it looks like now, which is definitely eroding and fading into back into the granite, which is beautiful in its own way.
Right, still beautiful. Julia, you're saying the second generation, and just for our listeners, who were the first generation of Whitmanites, Canadian Whitmanites?
The first generation, I mean, the most prominent one was probably Richard Morris Buck, who was the superintendent of the London Insane Asylum, it was called at the time. And oh, here I go.
No,
Look.
we're coming.
Oh,
Speeding through- speeding
Jordan,
through
you're
pictures.
so fast.
There we go. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's
perfect, perfect.
Morris there. So he became a big admirer of Walt before he ever met him, but then he befriended Walt and convinced him that he was going to write his biography. So he invited Walt up to London and spent a summer with Morris there so that he could pull all sorts of historical and intellectual details out of him over that course of time. But you were asking about the second generation.
Well,
So-
I'm just curious because this is super duper helpful. And I remember when I went up to see you there and I realized that there was such an incredible history of Whitman in Canada. So what you are doing here is really valuable for a lot of people out there. So take your time, Julia. The first generation, Richard Maurice Buck, and Whitman goes up there to visit him. Do you remember what year?
Yes, I do. It was 1880. It was the summer of 1880. Morris actually went down to Camden to pick him up to make sure that he was going to make all his train connections and whatever. And he had even prepped the London and larger Ontario public about Whitman ahead of time because he knew there was going to be some controversy. So he had done a series of lectures kind of extolling the virtues of the man and the work. June 3rd to September 29th. So he really did stay quite a long time. It was apparently the only time he ever left the States. And he largely stayed with Morris in London, although they did do a bunch of trips around, like they went down to Niagara Falls and they went to Sarnia. And then towards the end of the summer, they took this epic trek, mostly by steamboat, out through, they hit Toronto and they went to Kingston, spent some time in the Thousand Islands. And then they took the steamer up the St. Lawrence River, up the Saguenay to Tadoussac and Chicoutimi, and then down. And of course, Whitman being Whitman, he recorded it all. So you kind of get, and not just his not just in his diary, which is, he was very consistent at journaling, much more so than I think the average person. But he also wrote a lot of letters home, and those are also preserved, which gives me the opportunity to say this is an awesome book. Walt Whitman's Canada, Cyril Greenland, and John Robert Colombo. I don't know if anyone would be able to find copies of it at this point, but I have found this invaluable in terms of just putting together this presentation, because it compiles all sorts of things like Whitman's journals, and also things like the Sunset of Bon Echo, which I don't have handy, but I know you do, Karen. Oh no, there we go.
I have my virtual screen on, so I don't know.
Little magazines that came along with the second generation of Whitmanites, and Flora MacDonald in particular. So
an incredible history of enthusiastic reception for Whitman that is often bypassed because people talk about, oh, in the UK, Whitman did so well. But truly, as far as international reputation goes, Canada might have been the first place. I love how you emphasize the fact that that was the only time he ever left the States, when he went to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I remember this trip being so positive for him, this 1880 trip, because in the Whitman exhibition that I did in 2019, we had a letter that Walt wrote to Ralph Waldo Emerson from Canada, and he was extolling its virtues, right? Just really writing about the natural beauty and the places that he was going to go visit. Now, Whitman never saw Bon Echo, is that right?
That is correct. No, he never did. So all of the connection that Whitmanites have with Bon Echo, that's all a result of the second generation, and
Okay.
Flora in particular.
Came close, right? But never actually went there.
That's fish. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as, I guess, Toronto goes and everything, or London, I should say. So why did the second generation, which you're just about to point out, why did they choose Bon Echo as the center point for Whitmania?
Well, Flora MacDonald, she often gets referred to as Flora MacDonald Denison, but after she did go back to calling herself Flora MacDonald, so that's what I'm going to call her now after the dissolution of her marriage. Flora and her husband actually purchased the property that then later was donated to the province to become Bon Echo Provincial Park, and they bought it to be like a getaway for largely Torontonians. And she, in seeing the Mazinaw Rock, which is that beautiful, huge granite cliff face that rises out of Mazinaw Lake, it's just absolutely breathtaking. She saw that, and she saw in it some of the things that, like, she really associated with Walt, and its enduringness and its beauty and its majesty, and she was determined to dedicate it to him, which she later did with the monument. Yeah. So
an unbelievable monument. And Jordan, can you bring us back to that just for a second? I'm sorry that we are jumping around.
Oh, you know what? We could actually jump to me for a second, and I could play that video that has Mazinaw Rock in the background. Do you want to do that?
That sounds good to me.
Is that cool? Let's see if I can do it.
All right.
Stop sharing so you can do that, Julia.
Oh, I can't? Okay,
Nope.
There we go. So this is part of our Song of Myself video project.
Endless unfolding of words of ages.
You are hearing Elsa
and mine a
McCulloch,
word of the modern,
who is one of
the
our
word en masse,
regular readers reading
a
the
word
background
of
there.
the faith that never bogs.
And that is Mazinaw
Here
Rock.
and henceforth, it is all the same to me. I accept time absolutely. It alone is without flaw. It alone rounds and completes all. That mystic, baffling wonder alone completes all. I accept reality and dare not question it. Materialism first and last imbuing. Hurrah for positive science. Long live exact demonstration. Fetch stone crop mixed with cedar
I'm
and
gonna
branches
pause
of lilac.
this just so
This
I can
is the
show you.
lexicographer. This is
Can you see my cursor? Yes, you can. So it right here is where the inscription is. It's very hard now to see from the shore unless you already know where it is. But you can see it out on in the visitor center for Bon Echo Park. They have a telescope set up aimed at that spot, so you can go and get a better view. But most people either go out on one of the ferries that the Friends of Bon Echo runs, or take a boat out themselves to check it out. Okay, I'll stop sharing now. There we go. We've lost Karen.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Well, in the interim, I'll pull back up our slideshow.
Okay, that sounds good.
Oh, am I?
We heard you for a second there, Karen, and then we lost you again. Please ignore the groaning dog in the background. I'm trying to remember what we were talking about so that I could continue.
You're talking about Flora and how it was a playground for
Oh, Flora. Okay, well,
Torontonians.
I have to say just super briefly, Flora was amazing. She was a suffragette. She was a businesswoman. She had a regular column in the Toronto Sunday Weekly, I believe it was called, for a number of years. She had all sorts of radical ideas, even for a suffragette. She actually was kind of forced to resign her position from being president of the Canadian Suffrage Association for being too radical. I know I've said this before, but from time to time, I really feel like somebody needs to do a biography, and I'm starting to think I might have to be part of that. So put a pin in that. Did we get you back, Karen?
Yes, I am back. I'm sorry about that. I do not know why I was dropped, but I was like in a nowhere zone. And I just heard the tail end of that. You were going over some of the details about the second generation, right? Namely Flora.
Yes.
Okay, great. And I did catch, before I got dropped, that incredible video of Mazinaw Rock and the reading. So we're setting up here just what you all do and what the scene looks like. And I'm thinking, well, now that we're on this slide, maybe we can just put in a word about the third generation, because I see you have a photo here.
Yes. So
Yeah.
these generations are as they delineated them in Walt Whitman's Canada, and the only member of that third generation was Charles E. Feinberg, who was, I want to say, one of, if not the foremost collector of Whitman's work, most of which is now with the Library of Congress. And although he was born in the UK, he was raised in Peterborough, which is northeast of Toronto, and in Toronto, and then later lived as an adult in the States, which is where he died. So he deserves mention.
So did you also mention Horace Traubel?
No, I didn't. So Horace is kind of an honorary Canadian Whitmanite. He spent a lot of time up here, and he actually died in Bon Echo, which is a good chance to tell you my ghost story.
Oh, good.
So Horace was very frail at the time that Flora wanted to dedicate Mazinaw Rock to Walt. So she had invited him. They weren't sure he was going to be able to make it. He did. There was a lot of concern about his health en route. And then he arrived, and they were able, I think they fashioned a chair and like carried him down to the water and carried him onto the boat and took him out there. And Flora and he both placed their hand on the rock and dedicated it to Walt, which, side note, problematic because that rock is already considered sacred to the Indigenous folks. Complicated. I'll finish the story. Later, Horace was back in his room looking out at the rock, and he said he had a moment where Walt appeared to him, his ghost appeared to him over top of the rock and spoke to him and was urging him to come with him, to come into death. So and then he passed away in the park not long after that.
And I remember from being there, the house, I guess it's the ranger station with a little museum in it. There were some Traubel items in the cases there as well.
Yes, that was if I'm recalling correctly, that was special because of it being the 2019 anniversary of Walt's birth. And I can pull it up because I know which collector it is that owns those artifacts. I don't think those are part of the park's collection, although the park does have some other interesting things at that in that display, all about flora and Horace and Walt. Yeah.
So you're really helping us build an idea of just how much of Whitman's spirit was communicated up to Canada, right? Either by Canadians or by these remarkable circumstances like travel winding up there and partnering with Flora for a lot of the Whitman activities up there. So Whitman really did have a foothold in Canada, and you guys have decided to take that through, would you call it the fourth generation, or was there actually activism, like Whitman activism from Feinberg to you all?
I'm sure there was, and I just haven't found them yet. I mean, certainly the folks who wrote Walt Whitman's Canada, I don't know if they would consider themselves or would have considered themselves Whitmanites, but I imagine there must have been. I'm just not sure that it occurred in the same way. Like, I know even for me, before I got involved, because what happened is I would visit the park regularly, and it was kind of a bit of a pilgrimage. Like, I've done a couple of things like that, like the time I took my motorcycle down to Long Island just to check out all the Whitman sites. Like, I've kind of done these little things over the years, and it wasn't until a couple years ago when we moved out here that I was like, no, this is going to have to be a more organized thing, and joined the board of the Friends of Bon Echo and started the marathon and then started the Facebook page. And it was all about casting a net and being like, these people have got to be out there. I can't be the only person who feels this strongly about this and is willing to like use Whitman as a I don't know, a touchstone to try to enact change. Like, there's got to be other people who've had this feeling before. And I feel like I've been kind of throwing out little lines for a while. And then this is the biggest line. This is the big hook. Yeah.
It's such a remarkable story. And I guess this is where, Jordan, you come into the picture here too. You know, and I guess the way that you were brought in, as you said, you weren't necessarily that interested in Whitman, but the principles that Whitman represents. And I guess your friendship with Julia kind of sealed the deal here. Do you want to tell us about that? And I'm sorry that we didn't see all your slides. We would
That's
love
okay.
to see them.
There will be more. There'll be more. I'll probably skip ahead
Okay.
to a few of them while I talk. Actually, I can show some pictures actually of the latest generation of Whitmanites. Why are we going back there? Okay. So these are, by the way, just some photos that I've taken at the last three readings that we had in Bon Echo. So I'll speak very quickly to them and then I'll answer your question just because I guess I can do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, every year we've done it in slightly different sort of style. So the first year we were facing the lake for the reading, if I'm not mistaken, right, Julia? We were facing the lake in the first year, and then the second year we were.
No, the first year we were facing away from the lake, and we realized
Yes.
that didn't make any sense at all because of course, the view is gorgeous. So then we reversed.
Yeah, we reversed. I got them back, and then the third year we did it in the amphitheater, which is it's near the lake, but not on the lake. So these are just some photos. This is the photo you can see right here. Hopefully you guys can see my cursor.
Yes.
That's of Joseph, who was doing the painting the one year. A mutual friend of ours doing a reading with her it was her daughter, right? At the time.
Toddler.
Her toddler. We had a lot of young people, a lot of families brought their kids up. And then the first year we marked everything off by just checking everything off on a chalkboard. It was only in the third year that we did this sort of coloring book where we hung up a page from each one of the sections of the coloring book to represent the section we had just read. Yeah, and to answer your question, Karen, I did come about it basically because of my friendship with Julia. It's amazing what somebody who is passionate about something can do. Like, it can be infectious, and I went into it trusting my friend Julia. It was going to be interesting. It was a way to support something that I knew that she cared a lot about. And if I can just make a plug, I mean, this lady has hustled her butt off for Whitman with the Friends of Bon Echo, being on the board, organizing all of the events, doing pretty much everything by hand, and sort of doing it.
I had lots of help.
Lots of help, but let's give credit where credit is due. She's been the sort of muscle behind it, and I think that passion has translated into a lot of people like myself who've come back year after year or been exposed to Whitman's work. And I think that's a great way to share literature, right? When we sort of hold it up, and not to discredit academia, because I love academia and I'm a student of other things, but when it's only the purview of academics, then we're holding something that is a very visceral work from people and something that was really for everyone. And so I think Julia does a great job at bringing people in and making it exciting and accessible and fun. It's a beautiful day out in the country, if nothing else. And but my love for Whitman is sort of, it's been growing year after year, and especially after this year participating in the reading that we did virtually, seeing what everybody brought to that table and what everybody, the excitement and creativity that everybody brought. It's almost like Whitman sort of makes you feel like you could also write a song of yourself, right? Like there's a certain connection there. And I think he's brought a love of poetry back into my life and a love of literature. So I thank Julia for that. And it's just been, I'm not a Whitmanite yet. I'm a neophyte Whitmanite. So I'm waiting to get, my official designation from Julia in some sort of secret ceremony, which will be very clandestine.
Oh, we should do that.
We should do that. But even listening to her talk about the ghost story and the history, it's just wonderful that there's this sort of continuation of lore and myth and tradition. And I'm just very pleased to be part of that. So
I second what you're saying about Julia Jordan. She is an incredible person. I think, Julia, you really give people something to believe in with an event like this, and it's not a religion, but it's kind of a spiritual gathering, right? A gathering of good intent and people who consider themselves forces for good. So
it is.
I remember being at the 2019 one, and Jordan, I am totally with you. There was such a feeling of community. And part of it is the lack of any need for money or, like any sort of sponsorship, or, it's just good people who are really coming together. And Julia, I know you are doing this also for no salary. This is just like a labor of love to bring people together in this.
Yes, that is true.
So can you guys tell us a little bit about the people who gather? So you've done it 3 years, and it sounds like you have some regulars. Like, is there a typical participant to your marathon, or like, do you see the population change?
I know the first year it was a very small group. And to be fair, it was largely folks that I had some prior connection with, although not entirely. We definitely had some people, like, we put the word out, and Friends of Bon Echo did a great job of putting the word out, as did the park itself. I'm pretty sure they were passing the word to people within the park. So we did get some people who already had a love of Whitman coming out that I'd never met before. But I don't think there were more than 20 of us that first year. It was pretty small, because I remember a lot of us read multiple sections. And most of the folks who came from further afield, I think at that point, it was either from Toronto or from Ottawa. And then the next year, we've had kind of a bit of a, like, it just, somebody tells a friend, and then that person comes too. And so then the next year it was a little bit bigger. And that was the year that I was like, we're going to have to move off the beach. Like, we're starting to take over here a little bit in a way that I hadn't anticipated, which is why we then moved out to the amphitheater. Also, to be fair, it's a lot more comfy, and some people, that's really important when you're sitting for 2.5, 3 hours through a marathon. I want to show you something. So one of the things we did in the first year was, well, the first and second years, we made these little zines. I put together these little zines, and I commissioned in the first year this beautiful.
Hey, Jordan, could you
Oh, yes.
So
I can share my screen.
Yeah, exactly.
No, okay, there we go. So this is a beautiful illustration that Lisa Singh did. Every year we encourage folks to speak that last line in section 20 that is inscribed on the rock. So we always give it to people so that they have it handy, but it also just says a little bit about who we are and such. And then the second year we did that one, that was the inside. And then, of course, the third year, I was so busy compiling the coloring book, we didn't do a little zine. But I think we may go back to it, because I love these little things, especially because
the book is amazing.
Oh, the coloring book, yes.
I don't think you can see my coloring book because of
I don't think we can. It's your green screen is weird. We can see the cover. Jordan, do you want to show that little video?
I will. So the video, just so everybody knows, we go really quickly through the sections, but I'll try and make sure we get a couple views of it. So bear with me for 1 second.
So yes, again, all of this is volunteer. So everybody who contributed those illustrations, the illustrations that were in the coloring book, like it's all a labor of love for people. Nobody does this for their job.
So yeah, I go really quickly through it.
Oh, lingering on that one.
I know, I saw that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's not all of it, but it's oh wait, there's a celebrity
yes.
guest that we had.
Oh no.
Oh, yes.
Merge of myself and the outlet again. Do you guess I have some intricate purpose? Well, I have, for the 4th month showers have, and the mica on the side of a rock has.
Do you take it, I would astonish? Does the daylight astonish? Does the early red start twittering through the woods? Do I astonish more than they? This.
I love hearing kids read. It's just,
It is really special.
yeah.
She has had her share of Song of Myself marathons through time. She's gone to every single one of the ones we've had down here, but I was so happy because this was really such a family friendly event. And the coloring book, I have to tell you guys, was genius. That is a genius move because it appeals to everybody, right? Like everybody likes a coloring book. If you're a kid, you like it. If you're an adult, and the pages, as Jordan showed, are kind of varying in, PG ratings. So it's actually really fun for everyone.
Everybody.
Well, and it gives something too. I mean, like it initially was that same idea as the chalkboard, in that it helps people kind of follow along with where people are. But also I think that sometimes people do start to feel not like they'd like to be doing something else as they're enjoying the words. Like, you look around at the gorgeous scenery for a while, and then sometimes you just want to do a little something else. So
I think that's what strikes me about how you all are doing this. It's incredibly public facing. It's bringing poetry to people who might not otherwise hear it. And I like how lo-fi it is, right? You don't need a lot of money to do this. Like even the coloring book is just, or the zine, just kind of an easy thing to put together and copy. Do you have like a different vision for the future, guys? Or do you see yourselves continuing to keep it kind of like, close to the earth in this way?
I think so. Yeah. We're pretty low tech.
You like it that way.
And yeah, and again, it's more accessible. Like if it's let's see, I think people maybe don't see themselves in it as much, whereas this is very homey.
Mm-hmm.
What is the future for the event? Now, I know because we chatted briefly about this that you are hoping to do it in person next year. Is that right?
We are, absolutely. Although I will say, so just in the very near future, on the 25th, on Wednesday evening, we're going to be doing a watch party for the video project that we've been doing in lieu of hosting the event these past 2 years. We started it last year when it became clear that the event wasn't going to happen because we, like you guys, we had everything ready to go. And then suddenly it was like, womp womp, not going to happen. So we started the project then, and then just recently I'm like, no, I'm going to finish this thing. So that's all coming together, and everyone is welcome to join in on the watch party. It's going to be, I haven't got it there yet, but there's going to be an event page on the Canadian Whitmanites Facebook page. So that's the very near future.
That is amazing. And of course, we want to advertise for that event. What day did you say that it was again?
It is the 25th. It's Wednesday, August 25th, which is actually, it'll be 102 years that day to the dedication where Horace and Flora had their little ceremony. So that's why I picked that date. So that's that. And then next year, I'm hoping we'll be back in the spring. I mean, that obviously is very much dependent on what happens public health wise, and also, hoping that the Friends of Bon Echo and Bon Echo Park will be excited to welcome us back. So
now, one of the tricky things for us with the marathon down here is that we've actually had a pretty good time doing it virtually, just because one of the great advantages, as you know, is we can get people from anywhere.
That's
and
been amazing.
they can set themselves up in their space and do amazing things. You know, when we are in Brooklyn, even though the scenery I think is spectacular, it's much more limited as to what you can do. So Jesse, who is manning this whole ship right now, thank you, Jesse, for running the show. Jesse and I have been thinking about doing some sort of hybrid thing where sure, we're there, but people might be able to tune in from far away also. But your event is so much about being in that spot, right? So I wanted to ask you, did you want to keep it focused and just sort of present up there in person, or are you investigating options now that we're living in this weird Zoom world?
No, I mean, I've loved having the option to do the videos because we've had people from all across the country recording, and that's been lovely. And people who have always wanted to come but never been able to make it for one reason or another. I mean, it's a lot to ask. I mean, Bon Echo is not, for most people, it's not a day trip. And so there's a lot of folks who are just never going to be able to be there live with us, which is why it's been special to do the video project. But yeah, I mean, Bon Echo is super special to me and super special because of Flora's connection. So yes, would definitely, everything, all things willing, we will be back there next year.
And I do think it is really about being there, just vouching for that, because we drove up in 2019. And for the listeners of the show, what a spectacular vacation we had. Just book your yurt in advance, right? Because they do fill up very quickly. I remember racing the clock to do that. But if you're lucky enough to get a campsite at Bon Echo, oh my gosh, what a paradise of hiking. And Julia, did you want to talk about some of the peripheral events that I know you organized? Because one of my favorite things was the yoga on the beach.
Oh yeah.
And then,
well, that was all special for the 200th anniversary. I mean, I don't know. We may do more again going forward. I hadn't really thought about that. But yeah, that year I did a Whitman-themed yoga on the beach, which pulled in all sorts of quotes as we were in poses. And I realized at the time it was, I'd have you pretzeled up and then I'd be reading poetry too. And then I think you were all like, read faster.
Yeah, but there was all sorts of people participating. I think you got some real Whitman converts for those beachgoers who were just like, oh, yoga class, great. And they had no idea what they were tuning in.
They had no idea what they were in for. No, it's true. It was awesome to have them though. So there was that. There was the boat tour where we had one of the wonderful interpreters reading Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, and it was actually, if I'm recalling correctly, it was the abbreviated version that you have in your children's book that she ended up reading.
It had to be short for a reason. I forgot why.
Because of just, yeah, we had timed the distance between the rock and the dock. That was the time she had to do it. So that's why we had cut it down. But so there was that. I know there was some other things we did, although we did get rained out that one time. We were going to have a lecture. You were going to be speaking, and then the weather turned on us there. But yeah, there was a lot going on that weekend.
That was Walt keeping it real, raining me out. But I have to say that approaching the rock on the ferry and having someone kind of like, there to introduce this crazy, magnificent memorial, which, as you said, is kind of fading away and hence even more kind of in need of being seen by those of you that are watching. And then also learning about the Native American history, really.
And all the pictographs.
Right. Like, so it's not just Whitman's words that are on that rock. They're ancient pictographs that kind of surround those words. Did you want to say a word about that sort of confluence? The fact that I think you were the one who told me that the Native Americans of that region understand the world as being born on the back of a turtle, and that this rock is kind of shaped like a turtle's back. Am I getting that right still?
Yes, and I'm gonna get it wrong, so I won't say too much, but yeah, there is a connection there between the rock and sort of that creation story, if I'm recalling correctly.
So really a holy place is what I guess I'm getting at, right? Like
Definitely,
that
definitely.
rock representing something very spiritual for generations and generations of Native Americans, and now a pilgrimage site for Canadian Whitmanites and others that are just, taking in this very spiritual spot.
Mhm, mhm.
I know you guys put on YouTube, you're starting to assemble the readers of the past marathons. Do you all want to show some of those clips? Because I found them just so beautiful. There's a whole YouTube site, which we should mention. And in any case, we should mention how we get in contact with you. Like, how do we do these things? And, where are the Canadian Whitmanites? Do you actually have an office, or are you just kind of floating around like the Whitman Initiative does?
The best way to get in touch with us is either through the Canadian Whitmanites Facebook page or Canadian Whitmanites at Gmail. Yeah, we do have the YouTube channel, which is where we've been putting up all of those videos that we've been compiling for the playlist that is going to be the watch party on the 25th, which is I think the one you're referring to there. But yeah, that's it. I mean, we don't have a website. Thus far, I haven't really felt the need for us to have a website. Maybe someday. We're all very informed.
I love it. I love it because it is just born out of passion, and it doesn't require a lot. It requires time and love to bring everybody together in this way. And you provide a real service to people who are participating, right? A touchstone every year. And so we have the watch party coming up, and then we are looking out for next year's marathon. Do you guys also get together informally beyond the marathon as well? Or I guess the organization is very loosely based, so.
Individually, and because of the pandemic, less so. I mean, there's like, I was actually, you've met John McCorkle, who is in Toronto and is also
He's amazing. Yeah.
So, we've been talking about getting together next time in Toronto. We were supposed to get together just when everything went south. And then Eric Santor, who's one of our regular readers out in Ottawa, I was chatting with him this morning about, touching base. I think it's one of those things where we'll kind of see where it goes. Again, bringing it back to it's kind of, maybe there's a bit of an activist vibe. I feel like we are very kitchen table-y in that way. Like, we have conversations here and there, and hopefully it's progressing in some sort of direction that helps us cope with all the insanity of the life currently. I want to mention two more quick things. One, the soon-to-be Walt Whitman Geo Trail, which I've been working on, that is 52 caches. I don't know, you guys know what geocaching is, right? It's like a GPS-based treasure hunt. So geocaching.com to find more about that. So 52 caches, each one, the logbook that you sign when you find the cache is on the back of one of the coloring pages.
Wow.
And they all have links to find more about the poem and about, actually, it's the University of Iowa pages that I'm linking them to, because they've got pages for each of the sections. Right. So there's that. I'm doing a Whitman walk September 15th, partially along that trail, part of the Trans-Canada Trail. I'm walking from home to Bon Echo Park, which is 45 miles-ish.
Oh my gosh, you are kidding.
I know, sometimes I get these ideas like, that sounds like a good idea. I should totally do that. I feel like this is my gateway to through hiking. But yeah, it's kind of, and you guys had talked about this. I think it was actually you and Jesse who had talked about this, about Whitman's connection to walking when you did your walking tour. Yeah.
If Jesse wants to speak up now, because he is behind,
he
has organized all sorts of Whitman walks. There he is, and he's actually done a Whitman game that's about walking around,
which was one of my inspirations for the Geo Tour, the Geo Trail. Yeah, I was really excited to hear about that when I met Jesse in New York.
Julia, this is so exciting, and even more reason to come visit. I've
Please
always been
do.
a fan of the geocaching experience. I think it's such a interesting way to engage people and get them into the places that I don't know, that matter to the topic you're dealing with, or just that matter to the person putting together the experience. But it's such a great way to engage people with Whitman's poetry, and that idea of discovery is so potent and wonderful. I just love that. It's such a great part of the geocaching experience. And there's a whole community of like,
Oh, yes.
people kind of has that Pokemon, like people get into it, they want to find all of the Pokemon. They want to find all of the geocaches.
All of the caches, yes.
Mm.
Yeah. But what I love about, I mean, I haven't, to be fair, I haven't given the whole Pokemon thing a fair shake, but there is really something about finding a thing that is physically hidden. Like it just really, you really have to be, you can't be anywhere but in that present moment in that particular space. It's beautiful.
So wait, there are actually things that people, I know you said a treasure hunt. I thought the treasure was just the poetry, but there's actually an object?
Yes, with traditional caches, there is an actual object that you have to find. So the GPS takes you to the spot, and oftentimes you'll get a hint and you get some sort of idea in terms of how the cache is rated for like difficulty and terrain. But then you actually have to find the thing. Yeah.
Is it something
It's very satisfying?
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. Is it something that you take home with you, or it's just like something that's there?
The cache is something that's there, but then inside the cache, depending on the size of the cache, there are what they call tradables. So there'll be like little toys or all sorts of strange bits and pieces end up in caches. Some awesome things too sometimes. Like I put in section, this is like a sneak preview, section 18, there is actually going to be a gold pendant with 18 in that cache. So like oftentimes the first to find prize is kind of a more valuable thing. But yeah, it's fun. You can trade things or not. Some people do it for the tradables. Some people just do it for the joy of finding the thing, the satisfaction that you get when you locate the object. Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool. Jesse, what do you say to a road trip up to Canada? It's like necessary now, right?
Yes, and the yurt.
Yeah.
Also. I mean, you had me at yurt, but yes, geocache plus yurt plus Song of Myself reading. I'm in. So
yay!
Keep us informed. That sounds so much fun.
Absolutely.
I think we also have some extra Walt Whitman Way bumper stickers that we can contribute to the geocache.
Ooh, oh yes, please. That sounds great.
But it's fantastic news. And again, people can get in touch, and actually you are going to do this walk, this 45-mile walk on September 15th.
On September 15th, that is the plan. I've been training. I'm hopeful that I'm actually going to be able to pull it off. It is quite a slog. I'm going to have to, because of the time of year, I will start in the dark and I will end in the dark. And it's very informal, but I am encouraging folks who are keen, because people keep asking, oh, is it a fundraiser? Should I donate somewhere? I'm encouraging people who are interested in donating either to give money to the Friends of Bon Echo or to the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society of Canada. Those are the two things that I've chosen that I want to see money going towards. And if people do, send me a message and say, hey, I donated, and then I will send you like a piece of poetry from the road. I'm going to be doing like little live snippets as I walk. Yeah.
Jordan, are you walking it?
I will be supporting her from afar. But yeah, I think in coming years I would like to do that with her. I'm not as physically fit as Julia is quite now. So currently,
yeah. We're talking about some through hiking for next year.
We are. So yeah, and definitely,
Jordan, you have to start training.
Yes.
Oh yeah, instead of eating on my couch, which is what I'm doing right now. But yeah, yeah.
I think even for Walt, it's one day you're going to do it 45 miles, right? That's pretty substantial, man.
That's huge.
Yeah, I'm anticipating it. I'm hoping I can do it in under 15 hours, but that's the goal. Yeah.
Well, I love this. I love the grassroots feeling of this group and the love and the commitment. Jordan, You are amazing. I know you have tech skills actually, which is wonderful because it enabled us to be there, but there's nothing like being there. So somehow or other, I hope everybody who's watching the show decides to trek up to Bon Echo, maybe just to see it, but hopefully also to participate in the Song of Myself Marathon next year. Keep your eye on the Canadian Whitmanites Facebook page for any mention of that.
Post it on our website as well.
And our website, yeah, Julia, that's what we're all about, man. You have to tell us, and our website is out there, so we will definitely post any sort of news that you would like to share about these happenings.
I will definitely keep you posted.
And hopefully get up there to enjoy some of these amazing things and the history of the Canadian Whitmanites. Jordan, Julia, you have been absolutely wonderful and fantastic to have with us, and I have great admiration. Jesse, wouldn't happen without you, and I'm so glad you're part of this conversation. That's as it should be.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you
It's
so
been
much.
really lovely to talk with you.
Very lovely.
All right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you September 14th with Amanda Deutsch back here in Brooklyn. But for now, leaving from Canada, take care.